kind of a good segue, though. It's kind of a good segue into the clumps. So here's what we're going to do. We've broken them down into, let's say, well, I say I've broken them down into 4 different clumps. And I'd like to see, 5 clumps. 5 clumps. Jesse doesn't know where I've put the clumps, what I've called the clumps, what the clumps are. So we'll get his opinions on them as we roll through. They follow more or less the ladder more or less. There is a few changes within them, but we're going to talk about where people are in the competition halfway through the year, what clump they're in, can they move out of it, and also a quick rundown on how the coaches are going in those teams. Jesse, does that sound good?
That sounds superb. What a great way to spend a 7-game round podcast review.
That's right. So, one that we don't want to talk about from a tipping perspective, but we might have to cover it from the game's perspective. It was not that great. Let's start with what I'm calling the clump dumpster, or the clumpster, as I believe we called it a few weeks back, which is the bottom end of these of the table, and the clump that are down the bottom, the strugglers, the battlers. Let's start, Jesse, with North Melbourne. Obviously, not going well. Good win on the weekend, which is always nice for them. It's nice they got one. I didn't think they'd get any this year. So the fact they got one on the board is going to skyrocket them up the ladder, I'm sure. But what are your reflections on North Melbourne this year? Alistair Clarkson is the coach. Your thoughts on him? And, what's the rest of the season going to look like for
him? Look, they've conceded the most amount of points. They've scored the least amount of points. That alone is enough to just about indict where your season is at. I'm glad that the tedious one win in X amount of games narrative can stop, and now we get to hear, I'm sure, 2 wins in X amount of games for a while. But you know what? It's nice that narrative is being parked. I don't think realistically anyone likes when teams perform like this. And I say this having watched our crosstown rivals perform like this last year. It's not good for the competition. And while, yes, there has to be a bottom side every year, it's not nice when it's a historically bad side. And, the first half of this season, you could argue North are up there with, your 96 Fitzroy in terms of just on field, at least, poor performances.
Mm.
I'm glad they've got the win. In terms of Clarkson, he'd actually arguably be as safe as Longmire at the other end of the table, really. I mean, there is no point sacking him. They're not going to get anyone better. But realistically, if you go and knock on the door at the coach's holding pen right now and say, right, I would like a new coach. Who's got the highest rated ticket? Maybe Leon Cameron or someone unproven. That's what you're looking at. That's not going to be improved. We'll talk about some coaches who you might be able to find improvement from. I don't think Clarkson's in that boat. As long as he keeps his words to himself a little bit more, and the issues with his past tenure at Hawthorn don't re-escalate to a point where his public coaching position becomes untenable, I think he is quite safe. It's going to be tough for North. I think, honestly, a win for them would be another win this season. But then you have to find that. Realistically, I didn't think West Coast at home was going to be a game that they could dominate for SWATs. I thought they might steal it. And look, at the end, they probably did. But they did dominate that game for a significant portion of time. So that's a really big positive. They can game manage against sides around them. And I'm assuming West Coast will be in the clumpster for you as well. But if they can beat sides within their remit and within their scope, then that's a positive. You're not going to send them to Carlton, send them to Port and say, go beat them. They're honestly probably very unlikely to do so. But they got 4 points in a game that they could get 4 points off. That's a win in anyone's book.
Yeah. Yeah, I think everyone knows where North is this year, and that's exactly where they are. I think, it's a surprise, and it's good they got the one. But, it's probably more list management where they've got to kind of put their focus, right? Not so much the coach. It's just list management, making sure they can actually, nab Elliot, and then move on from there. And why did I say it like that? I've got no idea. Time to go. No, I've had a weird day. All right, let's move on. Let's go to... Sound like what?
Is there someone I can call?
No, it's okay. It's okay. We will move on to Richmond. Richmond, look, Do we focus too much? They're definitely in the clumster, 100%. They're down the bottom. A bit of a rough year, first full year for Uze, who's been bitten by the injury curse pretty hard and pretty devastatingly this year. I don't think there's really much to say about them other than what I just said. It's been an injury-ridden year. You can't really get a good judgment on where they're currently at because they're paying half of VFL side every single week. Adam Uze's been doing what he can with what he's got. I mean, I guess you're not going to get rid of him yet. You have to see. He's not had his chance to prove himself. So what else to say about Richmond this year?
Yeah, I think it'd be a hard firing. I actually want to talk about the last 3 weeks in isolation because in that time they've taken it to Essendon, taken it to Geelong, beaten Adelaide, which we'll talk about later. Realistically, they've been competitive against two of the current top five and beaten a side in their broad area. That's solid. Things are turning around slowly. We get the Dustin Martin Fox wall-to-wall coverage for his 300th coming up this week, so hopefully that inspires them a little bit. Yep. Choosing your own 300th game, please. That's honestly
that happened, right? I'm not crazy. Like he actually just he just kind of went, nah.
I'm unavailable this week. I'm unavailable.
I couldn't possibly play in Adelaide. My 300th in Adelaide, but I'm a Melbourne boy. I couldn't possibly play it there.
I went to private school. I'm not to be going.
Daddy. Now, let's move on to anything else for Richmond or...
No, I just want to do more impressions. My father will hear about this. Adam will hear about you sending me to Adelaide. Like, honestly, grow up.
Hey, look, and he could have celebrated with a win. Not guaranteed next week. All right, let's move on to West Coast. Adam Simpson. Listen, some solid performances from the Eagles the last maybe a month and a half. Take out the last few weeks maybe. Probably better, probably above par from where we're expecting them this year. I think we're both expecting them to be right down the bottom. You had them right above Freo, I'm pretty sure. But Thanks. I think for Adam Simpson, I think you could consider this year a win so far. Could you not?
Asked me that a month ago. Absolutely. But they have been dreadful in the last 3 weeks. They have been awful. Mm-hmm. That performance against Adelaide was unequivocally one of the worst performances by any side this year. And at the time, I gave a break. I said, look, it's just one of those games. It happens. Then they lead for 3 quarters against the most boring side in the competition and just capitulate in the last quarter and give up 4 points to St Kilda at home. And then also at home, a place that they almost beat Essendon at, flogged Fremantle at, flogged Richmond as well. So consistently a strong home side when they were up and going. They fell asleep for 3 quarters against North, or 2.5 quarters. They were dreadful. They were absolutely dreadful on Saturday. A 19-year-old's not that valuable, is he? Is he actually that good?
Well, I feel like with what it is with the Eagles is like once they lose one piece or two pieces out of their core three, those three being Harley, Waterman, and McGovern, like once they lose one of those three, it just seems to capitulate.
I'll throw in Kelly too in that.
And Kelly as well. That's fair. I was kind of going down the middle. Do you know what I mean? Like, because Kelly plays in the middle as well. But once they kind of lose one of those three, it just tends to fall apart. So Harley out this week, they had McGovern, they had Waterman, but they still seem like rubbish. Like
if they ever make me watch a game with Gaff and Shee taking a centre bounce again, I will ban it from being showed in Perth. It should come with a health warning. They were absolutely horrific on Saturday.
Jesse will run for government just in that one decree. No, what's your policies, Jesse? Never again. Gaff and Shee, are you not seeing it? I'd vote for you, Jesse.
No.
I'd vote for you, Jesse. Yeah, look, they kind of when they brought Gaff back in, I was just like, oh God, are we going back to this well? Are we? Because like they were playing all right without those guys. Like they were doing really well with the younger kids, like giving them a chance to get some time. But yeah, those two in particular need to kind of maybe just not play anymore. That's fine. Yeah. She'd had his moment. He had his wicked kick from the pocket. And every time he gets the ball anywhere near that pocket, the commentator's like, oh, it's Sheed's pocket. Ugh. That's literally that's the coattails he is riding at the moment. It's okay. You've had it. We move on. We move on. Now, I was debating whether to put these guys into the clumpster or the edge of clumpster, which is the next clump we're going to talk about. The word clump is going to lose all meaning by the end of this podcast.
Just before we go on, I have the same bottom clump, except mine is called the eighth circle of hell, which is where these three sides are.
Well, I like this. I like that we both have our own clumps. This is good. Now, do you have the So let's ask this: have you got the Adelaide Crows in the eighth circle of hell, or do you have them in your next clump?
I have them in my time machine clump, as in go back to the start of 2024 and try again.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. All right. Well, let's talk about them now, because I'm guessing that's your next clump.
I've got three in this clump. I've got three in this clump.
Okay. Well, let's move on. So we'll move Adelaide into my edge of the clumpster, and we'll see how it plays out with your time machine clump, and see if the same three teams come up. Adelaide, Matty Nix, I would say he's probably one of the coaches most in the hot seat at the moment. They were expected to do a lot better this season, like just have a bit of a blowaway season, start to put some pieces together. They haven't really done that. The games they've played well, they've played amazingly well. The games they've sucked, they've utterly sucked. Like the Katy Perry of the hot and the cold, you never know which one you're going to get. And it's weird. They're a weird team, akin to Fremantle several years ago. Like you just didn't know what was going to show up. Well, actually kind of akin to Freo now, to be honest with you. But what do I'd say if these disappointing performances keep going, I reckon that's when the old magnifying glass is going to come out on Matthew Nix a little bit more. What are your thoughts, Jesse? Time machine?
Yeah, I tend to agree. 6 points out of a possible 20 from their last 5 games, so it's not like they're turning it around either. They're treading water in that bottom quartile of the table. They seem to be directionless at the moment from Adelaide. I look at Adelaide and think this is a directionless side. There are pieces in there, and on one hand, they seem to know that because they have been very present in the rumour mill for free agency coming into off-season 2024. So I get the sense this is a bit of a whatever type season, which I detest personally as a concept. But I do from purely from an administrative point of view, I see the merits in that. I'm a football tragic / romantic first and foremost, despite finding topics like revenue weirdly fascinating. So I detest that just circling the drain. But needless to say, Adelaide came in with significant expectations. Defensively, they're actually quite good. They've conceded exactly 1,000 points from 13 games. That's pretty good. That'd be about top half of the competition. So they're defending quite well, but they're struggling to put teams away. And when they're bad, a la the Hawthorn game, and a la the Richmond game as well, so the last fortnight, when they're bad like they've been the last fortnight, they are dreadful. And they don't look like winning against sides that both at the time of playing them were below them, I believe. Yeah. Certainly Hawthorn were, and Richmond obviously are. So, there you go. So they've played two sides below them. One's now subsequently overtaken them, and the other is probably not going to this season, two games and a draw behind. But, all of a sudden, Adelaide have slid into the bottom 4. Who saw that coming at the start of the year? I wouldn't have had them near the bottom 4. I was pretty confident they'd be anywhere from kind of 5th to 11th, 12th. And look, they still might be coming into the season, but it's not been a good start. And if things don't turn around, Liam, I do think Nix is, in real trouble and potentially out of a job.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to argue. Hopefully they do turn it around. I don't mind Adelaide. But it's but they've definitely got to get the show on the road, I would say. And I hope it's not one of those years. It's like a quasi tank. We don't want that. We don't need quasi tanking around here. Not the full tank. It's the half tank. We don't want it. Jesse, who is next on your list? Are you still on the time machine?
Yeah, I'm still in the time machine because there was a real sense of hope around St Kilda at the start of the season, and there was because Ross Lyon had 12 months with the list. He had his time to build his identity. Players had come in. Liam Henry signed for big money. They'd shown again that St Kilda was now a club that players might just want to sign for, and so there was hope around at the time. But they've been awful. And I know they've won the last 2 weeks. But all that goodwill and that excitement for the future, certainly from an outside perspective, looks like it's been sucked out of the club.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan of St Kilda. I don't think that's a secret on this show.
What?
But I will say this: their support base is fiercely loyal. I think they're a bit misguided at times, but the ones that stick around and actually turn up every fortnight, those ones are fiercely loyal and would be up there with some of the loyalist supporters in world sport.
Mm-hmm.
I get the sense, and look, we kind of can relate to this as supporters of a premiership-less club, and I know I've been guilty of this in the last 24 months, that the restlessness does come in.
Sure.
And this was certainly me last season as a Fremantle supporter, where, if you want to see a false dawn, go look at that. Go look at the Time Machine Clump. Hello. Look at Fremantle last year. What's that weird movie from before I was born with the guy with the creepy white hair?
Back to the Future.
That one. Jump in your car and buddy, zoom off. Go try again. I'm assuming that's how the movie works. Never seen it.
You should watch it. It's really good. The first one. Watch the first one. It's really fun.
I will not be doing that. I have football to watch.
You're lost, man. You're lost. That's fine. Okay. Yeah, football.
But look, it's been a false dawn. Yes, they've picked up 2 wins. They very easily could pick up a third in a row, looking at who they're playing this week. But we've talked about their situation. They are facing a contract cliff. So in season 2024, A, those players out of contract need to show something, and B, the team as a whole need to show something, because all of a sudden you're left with this monolithic salary cap that you have to then use to bring in players if you want to compete.
Well, that's a good question though. Just to jump in there, because you were saying something like 25 of their players are out of contract.
It's 21.
21 players. So you'd be thinking that these players would be playing for a spot on their list, surely, because you don't get guaranteed a spot on an AFL team every now and then, right? But you just don't see that urgency out of a lot of the players. It's almost like their contracts are given because there's no one else coming through the ranks that's better than them. I don't know. It's a really weird. Yeah.
Yeah, Zach Jones is out of contract. He's been dreadful. Membry's been spending time in the VFL. Josh Battle's actually been their best one, but there's ever persistent rumours now that he may join another Victorian club. If they do lose Battle, Seb Ross is likely done at the end of the season. Well, he's out of contract. I don't think you could maybe give him one. I wouldn't give him much more than that off the way he's going. So, but these guys aren't cheap. Guys like Membry, Jones, those two specifically are taking up significant money in St Kilda salary cap. So you then need to focus on, well, what's your priority? Is it keeping Royal Marshall and Matt King? Is that the strategy you want to go down? Or is it then recruiting big money free agents? Because Steele's not getting any younger. King's about to enter his physical prime age-wise as a key forward. Wilkie's, potentially going to be another All-Australian defender. You've got pieces there. So you've got to have pieces. But pieces are useless if you can't either bring in talent via the draft or recruit big-name free agents. Liam Henry's threatened, and he showed flickers, but Ross has played him as a forward pocket. You don't need to tell Fremantle fans he can't play. You don't need to ask Fremantle fans whether he can play forward pocket. No, you can't. You put him on the wing. I saw him in the guts at times on Saturday night. I was very confused. And this isn't me jumping up and down on Liam Henry. I just don't think he's an inside midfielder.
It's not his spot. It's not his spot. He was a good wingman for us. He was starting to show good form as a wingman for us. And then to then draft him and then not play him on the wing, it seems bizarre. It seems strange because that's where he was proven anyway. And what he did, but
yes, St Kilda have a good defence. They've got a misfiring forward line. I would potentially be surprised if they finish better than 13th, so 12th or above, which then I think leads into club number 13. And Liam, what's happened here?
Well, I mean, it depends on who you're talking about. Are you talking about Brisbane?
I am.
Sweet, because so far we've had the same clumps, which is great. The edge of the clumpster. My last team in the edge of the clumpster. Yeah, I don't know. Window closed. Start again. This is where the time machine comes in, right? Go back. This is the year they were tipped to go all the way. The year that they were tipped to be in and around the grand final.
They go one better.
They go one better, right? and we both had this in our preseason ladder predictions that they would be up the top as well. What the heck? Yeah, what? Why? What? I know there was a whole bunch of stuff in talking about their off-season potential issues, and they were like, no, that's nothing. That's nothing. Well, if it's nothing, then what else is going on to make them this team, this list, which is fantastic, suck? There's no other way to say it. They've really, really struggled. And you know, you look at Chris Fagan, and I say this all the time. He looks sad. He always looks. I mean, it's kind of just his natural. He's got a resting sad face, but he actually looks physically sad after games and during games, and that can't be a good message or good energy to be sending out to your team. I would not have thought. But yeah, it's been a strange old year for Brisbane. If they one or two more down the drain, like if they don't win next week, funnily enough, Brisbane and St Kilda play each other. That is essentially an elimination final now.
Yeah, agreed. Crazy. Brisbane finally had a functional forward line on Friday night, and they won a game. You know, that could be the kick up their bum that they need to then go and get the result. However, they've not been very good, and you know they've been okay in recent. They've actually won 3 of their last 5 with a draw in there as well. So their recent form's actually pretty good.
Yeah,
but that start of the season put them a mile off where they would have expected to be. You know, top 4 would be, although they're only 10 points off 4th. So when you look at it like that, it's actually not out of the question. But I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I think based on what, and this is why I have them in the edge of the clumpster, because they could go either way right now. They could really go either way, and this could be a good catalyst on the weekend. Brisbane at the Gabba is normally a hard assignment. It hasn't been this year. It's been quite an easy assignment this year. And
they're about to lose too to renovations.
Maybe that'd be the best thing for them. Where they're playing Gold Coast for 5 years or something, isn't it? Gross. All right.
Sorry, people first.
People. Yeah, I've got some friends who are Brisbane supporters who live in Brisbane, and they are none too chuffed about that. But hey, what are you going to do? Let's move on. Now, I've just realized we're 40 minutes in, Jesse, and we are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams in. We have 12 teams to go. What say we break this down to a 2-parter, shall we?
Okay.
We'll go to because my next clump is the mega clump.
It's the
battle for the 8 mega clump. So here's what I suggest. I reckon we go to, let's say, the Giants.
Yeah.
And then next week we'll start with Freo go to the top.
Okay. Sound
all right?
Sounds all right. And we could do any corrections to our clumps if the 8th circle of hell expands.
Yeah. We'll do a quick fix up if we need to. But let's start with the battle of the 8 mega clump and how I see it.
Is that what you're calling yours?
What are you calling yours, Jesse?
I'm calling mine Jesse's circus of teams that might be good or shit.
Fantastic. Look, both names are great. I love how you came at me. Is that what you're calling yours? Cool. How judgy. How dare you? Let's start with the team that we didn't think we would be talking about in this particular situation. That's Hawthorn.
Vibe
Cups, man. Vibes. Sam Mitchell. Man, hasn't he done well? Haven't you done well? Look, a few rounds ago, this mob was in the dumpster. They were down there. And
down to the clumps.
Down to the clumpster. And then all of a sudden, they've just turned it on, and every week we're coming to see who they're going to beat next. And ain't that just what footy's all about? Who are they going to knock off next? Who's it going to be? Oh, Richmond. I love it. Richmond. It will be Richmond. But I'm looking forward to, like, in a couple of weeks they play Geelong. Can they do it? Can they take them down? They play Sydney. Can they take Sydney down? Why not? They can do anything they want. That's kind of how I feel about the Hawks at the moment. It's just like if you listen to the podcast, you know that we love the Hawks this year. We love watching them play. We love watching them do their thing. And look, I mean, you can't say enough about how Sam Mitchell's coached this young group of upstarts, this young group of whippersnappers, and also Luke Breust. What do you reckon, Jesse? What do you reckon about the old Hawks this year?
Hawks would have won their last 5 games if it wasn't for that collapse against Yata Quality in the final seconds. They are going. So if had that result gone a different way, they would be only one spot higher, but they'd be equal on points with 8th place GWS.
Yeah.
They are going very well. They're a fun side to watch. Players like Marbia Troll, Jake Jitovan, who were, probably fringe-ish players at Gold Coast and Collingwood respectively, have jumped to the best 22. Guys like Noah Anderson, Jack Lukosius, Touk Miller, and we saw what happens when you blunt the influence of a player like Touk Miller on a Saturday night against St Kilda. It does hurt that team, but bring it to Hawthorn.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very fun side to watch. They're a fun team. Even like players who have once been unlikable, like Sicily, are all of a sudden very likable.
I love Sicily. I love him. He's so good.
Lloyd Meek, he's great. He's very Lloyd Meek-like. That's all I'll say about him.
A little bit of Lloyd. Don't mind a bit of Lloyd. Yeah, he's doing very well. Hopefully he comes back and it's so good though. It's so good to see. It's so fun to watch. And I think every year, like, you need a team like that. Like, I look forward to the Hawthorn games more than the Freo games sometimes. Unless they keep doing what they did to Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, I'll watch them all day. But at the moment, it's just exciting to see teams like Hawthorn just having fun.
Take the game on. Have a go.
Yeah, they're taking the game on. They're having fun. They're confident in each other. It's fantastic. Love to see it. And yeah, Sam Mitchell, coach of the year so far for me.
Yeah, agreed.
In the convo. All right, let's go on to the next team. Who have we got next?
In my clump, I actually have Melbourne here as my next. I'm dragging them a spot down.
Fair enough.
Because I think they have been horrendous in the last month. Yes. They've won a game in that time. They beat St Kilda. But they've now won one of their last 5 games. So we can extend that to 5 weeks. In that time, they have lost to West Coast in Perth, which was the last time West Coast had turned up.
Mm-hmm.
They lost to Collingwood at the G, an undermanned Collingwood, a brave Collingwood and a gallant Collingwood, but it was a game they never looked like they were going to win. And, well, what happened in Alice when they were beaten by Fremantle by 92 points? This side
That's stunned the AFL world, Jesse. That's stunned. No commentator wants to talk about who beat them. They just want to talk about what the hell happened to Melbourne. It stunned everybody. They were shocked about what happened last week. Stunned.
So yes, I think, to be quite honest, Melbourne are a weaker side right now than the Western Bulldogs are. And I'm not exactly preparing the ticker tape parade to cross the motorway from Footscray to the G for their grand final this year.
Mm.
I don't think they're a particularly good side either, which should speak volumes about where I think Melbourne are at. I wouldn't say that a team like Hawthorn is more likely to win a premiership than Melbourne, but I would say that Hawthorn right now are more likely to impact the top 8 if they were to squeak into 8th position.
Mm.
I would say that Hawthorn would have more of an influence on whoever's in 5th than Melbourne would. If Melbourne did get through, their quality could end up shining through long term. But right now, realistically, Melbourne were meant to be one of the premiership favourites. It's eventuated into being a season where no one really wants to go with Sydney. So, open door. Sydney aren't going to play themselves in the grand final. Someone's going to have to be there. Mm-hmm. Melbourne were in one of the pole positions to do that. They're currently in 10th land. They've completely fallen apart in the last month and a half.
And they were up there a few weeks ago. Like, they were 3rd or something. And just one fell swoop. It's right down to the bottom you go. Simon Goodwin, I feel like obviously there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the off season and off the field. It just feels like he's not reading his team right. He's not reading the guys right to get the most out of them and understanding where they're currently at. Like, there's not many coaches where I can look at it and be like, I feel that there's a confusion with the coach as to what he's not doing, and something isn't going right. What do you say about that?
I'll ask you a question. I'll frame your question with a question.
I love that.
describe to me Simon Goodwin tactically.
Great. Jesse's
You have no
expert.
idea. You have no idea how to answer that, do you?
I have no idea how to answer that. No.
Because I can't tell you either.
And you're a tactics boy, but like watching them today, like they looked directionless. Ah, snap. All right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but that's my point. Like I'm not sure if Simon Goodwin actually looking at the raw talent of that 2021 Melbourne side. Melbourne had dynamism that allowed them to take over games at times, but they were also at times in 2021, poor. They had poor games. Ever since that season, they've been exposed as being vulnerable. Fremantle have done it 3 times in the last 3 years. They're not the only ones. Melbourne's vulnerabilities, offensively more so, have really started to crack through this season, and I just wonder how much of a stopgap inflated numbers by Bailey Fritsch in 22 and 23 actually were, because Ben Brown, of course, hasn't been playing consistently. Van Rooyen, and this isn't Goodwin's fault, but Van Rooyen probably hasn't taken that next step. I'd say Van Rooyen is good and he's serviceable, but he's nothing more. Guys like Wiedemann have come and gone. Melksham for a little bit. Like, they haven't had that reliable key forward, but then that comes down to recruitment. They sold the farm for Brodie Grundy, not a key forward. And I do start to wonder, and this isn't a commentary about Grundy at Sydney, it's a commentary of specifically for Melbourne. What does that then have an impact on for you as a club? You've invested heavily. You could argue this goes back to losing Jesse Hogan to Fremantle in 2018.
Yeah.
You can make that argument. There's been available key forwards since then. It just hasn't worked out for them. They haven't replaced what they've lost.
Yeah.
Well, they got Ben Brown on the very good. That was a very good piece of recruiting. But I get the sense they didn't pull the trigger on replacing him because Fritsch was going quite well. But Fritsch, it depends. If you want to be very pseudo-hipster about the modern game in AFL, Fritsch probably can lead a forward line. But there aren't more than 4, 5, 6 clubs playing pseudo-modern hipster AFL. Teams still have 2, 3 tall key defenders. If every team was lining up with like Luke Ryan and Alex Pearce and that's it, then sure. But that's not what's happening. Regularly you see tall backlines physically bully Melbourne.
Yeah.
And I think, from what the bits that I saw today, Liam, that's what happened. Offensively, Melbourne were bullied by Collingwood. And undermanned Collingwood.
Yeah, extremely undermanned. And Van Rooyen was actually okay today. He's probably the only person. Like, he was the only person who have kicked a goal for them in the first 2.5 quarters. Do you know what I mean? Like, everyone, like, he was doing his job. He was doing his job well. But you raise a good point. Like, who else is there? I'm trying to actually think you got Kyle Chandler down there, who was a small.
Cosy Pickett's had it down, yeah. They actually lost Toby Bedford to GWS, who was actually quite valuable for them as well, as a small.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's weird. They're a weird old team at the moment, and I think it's funny how you see some teams, like you see their past and you just expect them to keep that going. Doesn't matter what they've done in the offseason, doesn't matter who they've recruited, who they've lost. You see certain names and you go, they're going to perform. Like mid 2000s, early 2000s, mid 2010s to ish. You saw Hawthorn, you knew they were going to be up there. And when they started slipping down, you're like, oh, okay. But it took that slip for us to go, oh, okay, maybe they're starting again. I feel that's where kind of Melbourne is now. They're on that kind of, they've been so good for so long, and now they're actually on that little slide down the chain a little bit.
Had he not been dreadful on Friday night, and this is a good segue into my next team that I want to talk about, I would have said Melbourne go after Roy Lobb. To an extent, I still am. But Roy, you've got to go into bat for yourself. You've actually got to show more than 5 disposals and a hilarious grumpy face on the bench. I guess Grumpy Cat went very viral for doing the same thing and broke Carl Stefanovic, but you're not Grumpy Cat, mate. You're on $450,000 a year.
Yeah, I was about to say new meme format's just dropped. It's Grumpy Rory. Scrumpy
Can you
Lobster.
Can you put that in the thumbnail for the pod this week?
Yeah, of course. We don't have to for just the tips. It'll confuse everybody, but I'll do it for you.
I don't care. Put it in.
Okay,
That'll show the real fans, the ones that listen to this and just the tips. They'll get why Roy Lobb's very funny grumpy cat meme face is in the Just the Tips thumbnail. Let's move on to the Bulldogs, though, I think, because they're my team that I'll talk about next. I don't know about you. Are you in the same boat as me here?
Look, those two are interchangeable for me, so that's fine. Melbourne and Bulldogs are both next to my list as well. Yes.
I don't know. They've actually been all right in the last 6 weeks. Dogs, they've won 3 of the last 5. They're going well. They're scoring. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the competition, which is very much to do with the fact they've got massive, reliable and versatile key forwards in Norton, Ugle-Hagan, Sam Darcy, no Rory, not you. But they do seem to have a functional forward line. What they don't seem to have, though, is the ability to be consistent. They were pretty bad on Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't look very interested. And this is another club, well, ironically, the club that Melbourne annihilated after a close game in 2021's grand final, where both clubs, while the Bulldogs probably dropped sharper, both clubs have just about arrived at the same destination now, I would say. This is probably a conversation more broadly for next week.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to talk about this more in a holistic sense. But, tagging Bont out of the game just exposes the Western Bulldogs' fragility. You know, Liberatoria was too preoccupied with roughing up as many opposition players as he could rather than getting a kick.
Yeah, pretty much his MO.
They're desperately missing Bailey Smith and his creativity and run. McRae is clearly not the midfield bull he once was. And without Norton or Darcy, which are admittedly 2 gigantic outs, they didn't really have much going forward. Ugle-Hagan tried, but you can send 2 defenders to Ugle-Hagan and he's still physically developing into that player that can beat that, with consistency at least.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I think the Bulldogs, to be honest, I could see them getting a final spot. When I look at GWS, Gold Coast, Melbourne, Western Bulldogs, although the Dogs are a game behind the other 3, I can make just as strong of a case for them as any of those. Interestingly, all 4 of those teams lost on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So that does add a wrinkle of complexity into that. But, I don't know. I think this is a pretty good Jesse's circus of good and shit teams pick for me. I don't know which one they are.
No. Yeah. That's probably the benchmark for exactly that. Because it's just like you don't know what you're going to get with the Bulldogs, and I think I was on the verge of tipping them because of how good they'd been in the previous weeks. I think we mentioned this on the podcast. I was just like, they're showing pretty good signs actually, the Bulldogs, and true to form, you were like, yeah, pump the brakes there, mate. Just give it a second, give it another week, see how they go, and yeah, they go. Missing a few different pieces. The best teams in the competition can fill gaps. Yeah. Like most of the teams this year have some sort of injury woe. Some teams are worse than others, but every team has it except for St Kilda. Most teams can plug those holes. I actually think Freo are doing pretty well with plugging a lot of the holes that we've got through our injuries, and it's really nice to see because it's not something not a luxury we've had very often before. No. But Western Bulldogs this week showed that they don't really have those plugs, so it just leaks everywhere. That sounds gross, but that's kind of how it is, though, right? But I think Luke Beveridge, is probably fine. I think he's done enough to maybe take the pressure off him just a little bit. But how long does that go before it's like, okay, it's been enough now, Luke? You've been a good servant.
He's brought himself into around 18.
Yeah,
but if it's clear they're not going to make finals, I wouldn't be shocked if they make a call.
Yeah. Well, we actually have 9 teams left. So I reckon we call it there. We call it there for the time being, and we'll move on to the games. And the next week when we come back, we'll kick it off with whoever's next. Who is next on your list, just out of interest?
Currently for GWS.
Okay, sweet as. A lot of my mega clump can be interchanged. There's a few that I have towards the top that I'll keep at the top, But yeah, Gold Coast and GWS are the two that I have next, so they can be interchanged for sure. So stick with us next for Clump Part 2. That just doesn't that sound great?